Thank you so much for speaking with us. Can you when you will be going to the US and who you will be specifically meeting with, and what are your priorities when you get there?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I'll be, well, as National Chief, first of all, I stand with First Nations across both sides of the border as we strongly condemn the unilateral imposition of 25% tariffs by the United States government. And I think that it's very short-sighted actions by the President Trump and his offensive statements about forcing Canada to become part of the United States through economic coercion are very unacceptable. Canada will never be the 51st state of the United States. These actions, they're an affront to the spirit of fair trade and unjust burden of First Nations communities whose lands and resources are integral to the economic well-being of both Canada and the United States. First Nations have inhabited these territories long before colonial borders were established, and this historical fact and our territorial integrity are recognized under international law. We will be, of course, traveling to the United States a few times this year, and we've already, like the NCAI and the Assembly of First Nations, have an MOU that we signed back when Phil Fontaine was National Chief, and certainly the president of the NCAI and myself have been in discussions, and I think that it's important that we discuss the renewal of that document and update it and work together on that. So that's kind of one of our push. Will also be, of course, later this week I'll be meeting with the AFN executive and talking about our next steps, as well as meeting with the J Treaty Border Alliance. So there's lots of work to do, and I want to uplift chiefs and leaders from across the country, like the Swetena First Nation, for instance, and there's a chief from Sturgeon Lake in Saskatchewan that has been doing some of the work, as well as of course the Kahnawake and many of those nations in Quebec, First Nations in Quebec and Ontario. So there's lots of people doing lots of outreach on both sides of the border, and I'm so proud of First Nations for doing that work. Because the tariffs that come into effect this week threaten the economic stability of First Nations enterprises. Yeah. They will disrupt crucial supply chains, and they'll undermine the principles of respectful nation-to-nation and government-to-government relationships. Yeah. So we will be traveling this month to meet with leaders of many Native American organizations to discuss impacts on our inherent and our treaty rights, including the right to maintain spiritual, cultural, economic, and social relations across the borders.
National Chief, 25% tariffs from the US are expected to hit Canada tomorrow, along with a 10% tariff on Canadian oil. You talked about it a bit there, but can you explain how this will impact our many nations in Canada, and what is the AFN's plan to address this?
Yeah, well, certainly. Like I said, we'll be meeting with the J Treaty Alliance, we'll be meeting with our regional chiefs, and we'll be meeting with experts on this issue all week, and we'll have more to discuss about that once those tariffs hit and how that impacts. I think that there's so many discussions happening across this country, and I just have to say that I know that there's a Team Canada approach, and I think that the Team Canada approach needs to make sure when it comes to trade and border discussions in 2025 that it must include First Nations expertise and perspectives. I also encourage all premiers to make sure that they're meeting with leadership in their provinces on the traditional territories of First Nations lands. And I think that this hasn't happened quick enough, which is, I know we've come a long way in this country. We have a long way to go. And when provinces and the federal government are meeting, I want to uplift, of course, the Justin Trudeau, I want to uplift him for including us and for having those discussions with First Nations on a weekly basis as Prime Minister. I also want to uplift, of course, Pierre Poilievre, who's been, having discussions with myself as well over the past number of weeks. And, other political parties in Canada. I mean, I know that we're all united, but at the same time, when provinces push back on First Nations being at the table, that's not a good thing. They don't supersede First Nations. And so I think sometimes here in Canada, when we want to talk about a Team Canada approach, that we need to make sure that we're including First Nations perspectives and making sure that First Nations people are around the table.
National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepinak, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Chumigwech.